and thank you for watching the 2018 Fall Legislative Forums, hosted by the Ashland Chamber of Commerce. I'm Cindy Bernard, past president of the Ashland Chamber of Rogue Valley Roasting Company and the chair of the Chamber Legislative Committee for 2018. Moderating the discussion with me tonight is Sheila Clough, CEO of Asante Ashland Community Hospital, and Sheila serves on the Chamber Board of Directors and as the chair of the Chamber's Health and Wellbeing Committee. Tonight we will be introducing Pam Marsh, who's running as an incumbent for State Senate District Number 3. Welcome. I'm sorry, House Representative. Oh, sorry about that. Her opponent, Sandra Abercrombie, did not respond to the invitation to participate. Each election year, the Ashland Chamber hosts legislative forums. This year, we are also hosting forums for Ashland City Council, Position 2, 3, 4, and 6, Parks Commission 3, 4, and 5, State Senate District 3, Jackson County Sheriff, and Jackson County Commissioners, Positions 1 and 3. All candidates were sent the questions prior to the forum. The forum tonight is being recorded and will air on local community television, the RVTV website, and the Chamber's website, along with additional election information at the Ashland Chamber at ashlandchamber.com. The Ashland Chamber has many decades of long relationships within the business sector, and through effective community partnerships with SOU, the hospital, and OSF, along with the City of Ashland. We promote business and the community by providing business resources, creating events such as the Festival of Light and the 4th of July, promote tourism, the economy, improve quality of life, and serve as the welcome center for our city. Over 700 businesses are members of the Chamber, representing thousands of employees and jobs, and hundreds of community volunteers who are engaged citizens helping to make our community better every day. We believe in collaboration and effective relationships, which we hold dear. Each candidate was mailed the questions in advance. After each candidate has been introduced, they will have a 2-minute opening statement to discuss why they are running for their position and what skills and accomplishments qualify them to serve as an Oregon elected official. Following the opening remarks, candidates will be asked 2 questions with 3 minutes to respond, and 1 question with 5 minutes to respond. A bell will ring when the candidate has 30 seconds and then again at 10 seconds remaining. If there's any time, they can have a 2-minute closing statement. They must adhere to this restraint. Additionally, each candidate had to sign a consent form in order to participate. The Ashland Chamber is a private, nonprofit, mutual benefit association. We require that the candidates refrain from any form of speech that includes profanity, obscenity, hate, racism, or vulgarity, or that is insulting or offensive to any ethnic, religious, political, or other identifiable group or individual, as determined by the forum moderator. A violation of this rule will cause the candidate to be removed from the forum. We expect and will insist on respectful behavior. This forum is not a debate, it's a forum. If time allows, we may have follow-up questions for the candidates, in which case candidates will have 2 minutes to respond, again using the bell system. Please note that the candidates' introductions were submitted by the candidate. Since it's just Pam, we will head straight to you, and thank you for being here. Pam Marsh was elected to the Oregon House of Representatives in November 2016 after 4 years on the Ashland City Council. She serves on the board of Oregon Saves and as a member of the Oregon Broadband Advisory Council. Pam is vice chair of the House Economic Development Committee and a member of the Revenue, Energy and Environment and Ways and Means General Government Committees. Before her election, Pam served as executive director of the Ashland Emergency Food Bank. Her family has owned the Green Springs Inn and Cabin since 1994. Welcome, Pam. Thank you for being here.
So great to be here. Thank you. And thanks to the Chamber for hosting these.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Representative Marsh, tell us a little bit about why you're running for re-election and what special skills and accomplishments qualify you to be our next representative.
Thank you. Well, as the introduction indicated, I was elected 2 years ago for the first time after serving on the City Council for 4 years, and I have been gratified and honored to have this position for 2 years. And I must say, in work in Salem, there's one sort of overwhelming adjective that I would describe it, and that is sobering. 2 years, I've learned carefully that we are a state with many assets, but we face some big challenges ahead, and we have some limited resources to be able to deal with those. Despite the challenges, I think we did some very good work that I'm proud of in the last 2 years. Those include, we passed a transportation package that'll put more than $5 billion over the next 10 years into our roads, our streets, and transit. For the first time ever, we're going to be funding transit, which is quite exciting. We were able to keep 1 million Oregonians on the Oregon Health Plan, thanks to both our actions and to the voters who spoke out when Measure 101 was at the table. And so we have 600,000 adults and 400,000 children who will continue until the next crisis to be able to receive health care, and I think that was a major accomplishment. And we passed some very important criminal justice reforms that are particularly relevant to a community like ours that has a history of addiction really feeding the child welfare and the correctional system. So to the extent that we can get to those folks and get them in the system and give them alternative ways to work their way out of the problems that they're experiencing, I think that's a big plus. So lots of accomplishments, but big things ahead. We haven't been able yet to do anything about our disintegrating climate. That's first on my list. We have big revenue problems in this state, and I think we'll have an opportunity later today to talk about some of those. And you know, we've just experienced smoke and fire, so some big challenges ahead.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that introduction. We also have some great strengths in Oregon.
Absolutely.
And tell us about those strengths from your perspective. How do we build on those strengths to continue making our economy vital in this region?
Absolutely. Well, I think I would point out a few different things, although I think we're a state with, as you know, many assets. But let me point out a few. The first I would point to is we are a state that has a history of innovation. You know, way back in 1902, we were the first state in the nation to implement initiatives and referendums. I was looking back on some of that history, and of course there were lots of charges of socialism sneaking into the system when we did that. But what a tremendous step forward to involve citizens in the operation of their government. We passed, in the 60s, we passed the beach bill to make sure that the public has access to our beaches. We passed the bottle bill. We passed healthcare transformation. Really, we've been leading the state on how we've used our public dollars to keep people covered with as good a healthcare as we can possibly manage. So we have a history of innovation. I think that's a good thing for us to carry forward as we look at these problems that are a little intractable at times. Secondly, we are a state where we know each other. We're only 4 million people. We have histories with each other. If you want to get to know any of your elected officials, you can probably find them at the grocery store. Even the statewide, if you want to have an opportunity to meet your U.S. Senator, he's probably marching in the 4th of July parade. That has led, I think, to a history of collaboration that we need to continue. And in fact, in the legislature, more than 85% of the bills that we pass are passed on a bipartisan basis. People don't realize that because we tend to focus on the ones that are more contentious. But really, we work well together up there, and I think that reflects the history that we've had in doing that. We have an incredible natural environment in Oregon. Many of us moved here because of the mountains or the beach or the forests or the open lands. That really serves as a bulwark in our quality of life that make people want to live here and businesses want to locate here. So I think our natural environment is a tremendous asset. And then the fourth thing I would like to point out is that I think we are a state that is willing to take on hard problems. I sponsored an event last Saturday here in Ashland called the Smoke and Fire Summit, because we've had this very difficult summer, and people needed a chance to come together and look at all the threads involved in that and think about how we might address it. And we had, on a Saturday morning, nearly 400 people show up, committed to spend 3 hours of their Saturday morning, because they understand that these are complicated questions. There's no simple answer, and I think that was a takeaway of the morning too. But there are things we can do, and we're willing to do those things. So I think that tenacity and our willingness to really confront issues head on is a tremendous strength.
Great. Well, since you brought up the wildfire topic, we'll follow up with a question on wildfire. From your perspective as a representative, how do you tackle the wildfire situation? And what would you do if you were reelected?
Well, clearly, we've had a miserable summer here in Ashland. We had a month of significant smoke. It's impacted our economy. We've worried about our health impacts. We couldn't let children go out to play. There have been social and emotional impacts from having to stay inside or having to wear those masks where you couldn't recognize your neighbor on the street. So the Smoke and Fire Summit was really a chance for us to come together and recognize that while we have difficult, persistent conditions, there are still things that we can do in a number of areas. So we looked at forest management, we looked at health impacts, we looked at economic resilience, building economic resilience, and we looked at climate, because we know that climate is an exacerbating factor when you have forests that are vulnerable to fire. At the state level, I think we need to really take a multi-pronged approach in assisting communities in dealing with each one of these areas. In the health realm, for example, we used to think we only needed shelters in the wintertime for people on the street, but now we understand that we need to really look at year-round kind of shelters. We need to look at our public buildings and try to figure out how secure they are from smoke infiltrating those buildings. The state needs to support that work. In the economic resilience area, there's a whole lot of work we need to do now that the season is done to figure out whether we reposition our tourism industry, whether we look at really building on our shoulder seasons, whether we look at trying to make our economy broader and maybe less tourism oriented. The state has some supports, some economic development monies and some expertise up there that I think can help us with that. And clearly climate. We have got to pass some significant climate legislation so that we can start to turn the trajectory of emissions that are fueling all of this. And then in the forest management, there's work to be done there as well that the state can support. So lots of work.
Great, thank you. So what are the other challenges, the big challenges that you see facing you if you were reelected as a state representative, and how do you solve those challenges?
Well, I think first we need to understand them, and that was the point of the Smoke and Fire Summit, was to bring us all together as a community so that we can start to parse the experience that we had this summer, understand what the situation is, understand what some of the responses might be. And so smoke and fire, in terms of our regional challenges, I think are at the top of the list. Right behind that, again, I reiterate the need for some sort of climate legislation. We've made attempts at that over the last couple of years. We haven't passed anything comprehensive. Clearly, we're looking at another 5 years ahead of us that is going to be predicted to be hotter than even the climate forecast might suggest. We need to get ourselves in action fast. And so climate legislation to at least set in place the policy that we're going to reduce emissions is essential. And then we have a whole lot of work to do to actually be able to meet the emissions targets. So that's not the end-all be-all, but it would be the first step. We need to look at revenue. We are a state, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, that is stretched thin. And since our education budget is about half of the general budget, that means that when we don't have revenues, we can't lengthen the school day, we can't lengthen the school year. And we can't support college students without putting 70% of the cost of their education on their own backs. So revenue, being able to grow our revenue fund is a huge challenge. We need to look at two issues that I just want to touch on quickly. And one of them is mental health. And I bring up mental health because I hear that every place I go. I hear it in the early childhood realm. I hear it from the K-12 folks, the concern over children who just don't know how to self-regulate, and an acceleration of this over the past 5 years. It's extremely alarming. But not only do we hear mental health concerns there, we hear it from the police, who are spending an increasing amount of their time responding to mental health calls. And last week I was at a gathering of the senior and disability services folks, and they talked about mental health in our senior population. So something is happening. We're having a crisis across the board, and we really need to figure out how to invest in good mental health services. And the last challenge that I just want to call out, because I think we're just starting to think about it, is we are going to have a big crisis about water in this state in the years to come. In midsummer, news reports were describing half of the state of Oregon as being in a drought. Now the number is like 93%, and it's September 17th, and it hasn't rained here yet, and we have no sign of rain in the next 10-day forecast. This is going to mean a lot of investment in water infrastructure. What happened in Salem with the contamination of water is going to happen more, and we're going to have to figure out how to really invest in conserving water.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. You know, you mentioned something that I suspect that our viewers would like you to expand on a little bit, and that was the topic of growing revenue. What levers do you see there to be available to our state to grow that revenue?
I think it's valuable to start that conversation with just a look back on how the heck we got to where we are. And I would go back to 1990 when the state passed Measure 5, which was the first measure that addressed property tax reform. There were a couple of others, 47 and 50, that happened later in that decade. As a result of property tax reforms, and we can argue that they were important, or that judgment aside, we lost about $2 billion a year out of public revenues. We are essentially still chasing the $2 billion. Because of property tax reform, 2/3 of school funding got shifted from the local level, where it had been funded through property tax, to the state level without any additional revenues or any new source of revenue. So that gives us some perspective on why we are still scrambling to catch up. So to make matters worse, we are a state without a sales tax, and of course we can argue that for a long time. What that really means is that we are very income tax dependent. 85% or more of our general fund budget comes from the income tax. What that means is that when we have difficult times, we have an unstable revenue system because the income tax takes longer to rebound from hard times. Because we don't have, as other states do, a sales tax or some other kind of corporate tax. We don't have the proverbial third leg of the stool that would allow us to have a more stable revenue system. As a result, we have a gap. We have looked at a gross receipts tax in the 2017 session. We put together a whole package that had cost containment and PERS reforms, but we weren't able to get it passed. Clearly, revenue is going to continue to be a big discussion in the coming year because it has to be. So I'm not sure we got to solutions, but that's the problem as I see it.
Yeah. Well, we'll kind of continue on that line of finances. You know, there's the revenue side and there's the expense side.
Right.
How do you see Oregon overcoming those financial challenges, and what are some of the priorities that you have on helping us to overcome those challenges?
Sure. Well, I think it is, first of all, you have to recognize that it is a two-sided question. It's how much money do we get in the door, and are we spending it as wisely as we can? And we have to look on both of those sides. I do believe that we need to find that $2 billion or some equivalent of it over time in order to really invest in schools, including our early education system and our higher education system in the ways that I think Oregonians want to invest. So, you know, there's some options there. We can continue to look at the corporate side. We can continue to look at increasing fees, which have provided more and more of a part of our budget. We need to look at property tax reform over time that probably would be revenue neutral, but perhaps would get us to a more equitable system. And then, so that's the revenue side. On the expenditure side, cost containment is actually, that was implemented in 2017, has actually had a significant effect. We're seeing some pluses now because of that cost containment. What we didn't do, and it's a big discussion, is anything around the issue of PERS, the Public Employee Retirement System, which is an increasing burden, particularly on our school districts and our local governments, as more and more of the personnel budget as it has to be used to pay for retirement benefits from people who are long gone. And there are some big reasons for that. It's not an easy fix. And it would probably take us the next, a lot of our chunk of our time here today to talk about that. But it is very clear that PERS will continue to be one of those issues that's on the table. And then I think we need to really look at how we can build our own local economies to be as healthy as we can within our own communities and to generate tax revenues out of the act of doing business well. One of the big issues that I'm involved in, I'm very excited about for 2019, is the expansion of broadband across the state of Oregon. We kind of take that for granted here because we have had broadband for a long time in Ashland. We've been an early adopter. But there are still 50 schools across the state that have no broadband or very inadequate broadband. There are at least 10% of the population that isn't on broadband. And these tend to be, of course, in our most far out parts of our out communities. The communities that are really dependent on introducing this technology for generational change. We know that broadband more and more is being used in agricultural and forestry sectors. So we want to take some important steps to actually get us over that lip and get everybody on broadband over time. Here in our own community, I think we have some workforce issues that we are looking at both locally and at the state level. We have low unemployment rates and a real gap for many industries in their ability to expand because they're still looking for workforce, for people who have good work habits and will show up. We know that our state's workforce goals are for 40% of graduates from high school to get a 4-year college degree, 40% to get a 2-year or technical training certificate, and for the last 20% to come out of high school with good work skills and ready to go to work. We're falling short of those goals, and that has an inevitable impact on our ability to grow both our local and state economies. So these are the other side. There's a revenue side, there's the how do we spend money, and then there's how do we go out and actually build robust economies. What are the tools that our local communities need to make that happen for them?
Great. Thank you, Pam. Any follow-up questions?
Not for me. Thank you.
Well, I was surprised when you were talking about the financial challenges that healthcare funding wasn't part of that. So would you spend a few minutes talking about the healthcare funding challenges and where you see that in terms of priority and potential solutions?
Thank you for bringing that up because it's a huge one.
It is.
When we started when we came together in 2017, we were looking at a gap in the healthcare budget of about $800 million, as I remember. We did a bunch of cost cutting. We got it down closer to $600 million, and then we worked with the hospitals and the insurance companies to scrabble together enough funding to, again, keep that 1 million folks on OHP. And some of that gap was predicted. We knew that the federal government would be stepping back from some of the supports that they gave us when we expanded our doors to more Medicaid patients. So we figured out how to fix the problem at that point. Not all the solutions were permanent ones. And as we come together next year, it looks like the gap, the numbers are still coming together, but it's going to be as big, if not bigger. The solutions that we negotiated in the last round were criticized for not being permanent. And in fact, they were not permanent, although they were still good enough to get us through 2 years, which was the goal at that time. So we're going to, there are folks now in the process of trying to look at that and gear up a budget for next year. We'll be looking again at the hospital provider tax, but maybe in a slightly different format. There may be some talk of going back to the premium tax. There have been some innovative solutions on the table that haven't proven themselves to be good long-term solutions. So it's a huge question, and I think it's an enormous priority. If we walk away from health care, the 1 million Oregonians who are receiving it have no place else to go, right? And we will be paying for their care in much more expensive and much less satisfying means when they let their illnesses go beyond a good point because they had no opportunity to take care of them.
Great. Thank you so much for that follow-up.
Yeah.
That brings us to our closing statements. I'll let you take a
we're
water already. We're very efficient. So you've got, give us a little bit of an overview, your closing statements.
Sure. Well, thank you. Well, first, I just want to thank the Chamber and both of you for being here. I don't know if people always understand what an extraordinary chamber we have in terms of its commitment to the community and its ability to bring people together for all kinds of events, whether they're holiday events or election events. So I'm very grateful for that. I would like to just say quickly, I'm grateful to have been in the office. I work full time at it. I hope people will see that I'm bringing some value to it. And then I'd just like to pitch a couple of events that I have coming up. Okay, the first is with help from Bella Man Ray, who is a Ashland High School student. For her senior project, we are running There Ought to Be a Law contest, because we know ideas for laws come from everybody. You don't have to be a legislator to have an idea about something that should be there or something that should be scrubbed from the books. So Bella's running the contest. We'll take entries for the next couple of months. If you are interested, go to my website, rep.pammarsh@oregonlegislature.gov, and you'll see an entry form. We want your ideas. Bring them forward. And then Bella will follow the legislation that is selected and let the community know what's actually happened to it, because we'll introduce at least one idea as a bill in 2019. That's a commitment. The second event that I wanted to plug is on October 4th, we are putting together a manufactured home conference here in Ashland. And the reason we're doing this is because manufactured homes are a huge part of our naturally occurring affordable housing here in Jackson County. A little known fact, we have 104 manufactured home parks in Jackson County, 10% of the state's capacity. There's a lot of innovative work happening in this realm up north with alternative models of ownership and innovation that allows people to upgrade their units or even to trade them out. We want to bring that work down here. So this is the first step of our community really getting involved to support both owners and residents in manufactured home parks. So October 4th, let me just say, on my website also.
Very good. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Representative
you.
Marsh.
Thank
It's
you
been a pleasure.
enormously for having me. Very
Yes.
grateful.
Thank you, Representative Marsh. It was great to get your insight on so many issues. And thank you, Sheila, for moderating. And thank you to the local citizens for watching and staying abreast of what's going on in our local and state communities. Thank you for watching.